Okay, we're up to Ois Gimel. However, this idea that we have to overwhelm with the godly fire and passion in order to counter and push back against the passion and fire for material things is not something that is constant and sustainable. Like the pasuk says, the world was not created for destruction, but it was created to be a settled world. And the idea of l'sheves yitzora is that it should be, as we will explain, a land that is settled and occupied. Regarding which, we now can come back to our original point that the Gemara says that if one reads Kriya Shema without tefillin, again, it's as if he brought the karbonos without the nesachim, without the libations. And earlier in the Maimer, we asked the question, what is the dimion? Why are these two parallel ideas? So we now explain. The idea of tefillin in general includes all of Torah and all of mitzvahs maisius. As the Gemara says, that all of Torah is compared to tefillin. And just like in tefillin, we engage the moichin elyonim of the higher spheres via the letters that are manifest in a material way. And the idea being that a person has to humble himself and say that it is enough that I should serve and be a servant of my master, and to make himself a keli for the presence of Hashem, for the dirba tachtonim, that is, through the study of Chumash, the study of Mishnah, the study of Gemara, Halacha, and Agada, which are speaking about gashmistic things. And these are kelim, mikelim, shainim. You recognize that quote from Megillas Esther, from the yayin of the Malchus, again, utilizing the terminology from the description of Achashverosh's party, which we now describe to be the or ein soif that is invested within them, with the abundance that is commensurate with the king, which is the great and abundant characteristic of Hashem's infinite generosity. Like it says, the Jewish people saw the Yad HaGedolah that Hashem did in Mitzrayim, meaning Gedolah, what does it mean that Hashem's great hand is an infinite hand, and this is the humility that Hashem brings his infinity into the ordinary, that he did in Mitzrayim. That means that Hashem impacted through the Shem Havai, even in a place of constraint and limitation, Mitzrayim, just like all the halachas that speak about the laws of agriculture, the laws of daily activities, and so on, which again are taking the loftiest concepts of godliness and embedding them in the most ordinary confines of the world. And here the Alter Rebbe explains in parentheses that the term Yad HaGedolah, we could say, is similar to what it says, that Chachma is invested in the Chesed Ilah, abundant Chesed, and from this level it is expressed in the Chachma Ilah, even down here. And even when a person is engaged in their ordinary business, if they conduct themselves honestly, then the world is built on chesed. And then he goes and he takes from the money that he earns and he gives tzedakah, again, the characteristic of chesed, which is an extension of chachma. Like we say, Hashem is murdered hatal, mechalkel chayim bechesed, that just like chachma gives life, so too through tzedakah we give life to the poor person. And if a person will so commit himself, his heart and his spirit, through the Kriya Shema, and one action will evoke a commensurate response, that Hashem Echad will dwell within his Torah and his activities. Now the idea of this avodah is to draw down, of course, the dirba tachtonim, that it should be only focused on Hashem, Eino Id Milvado, which is far greater than even the passion that can be described only as wings, which elevate mitzvahs, because it is necessary that there be some form within itself, within the heart and the soul that is impassioned thereby, which is not the case when we only say ein oid, a total bittul mitzias, as opposed to ein oid milvadoi, nothing else, and nothing else besides him. That there will be no sense of self at all, and no personal desire, only that my desire is the desire of Hashem. Whatever Hashem wants, up, up, down, down, it's irrelevant. Regarding this, it says that the last action was the first idea, that this level, which is called the land of Canaan, Canaan meaning hachna, submission, that a person lowers himself, or humbles himself to this level, like it says, his feet go down to death, that since he is connected down to material things, it's possible, chas v'shalom, that he could stumble into simple taiva, regarding which we are then instructed to uproot the evil from within ourselves. Because when I will bring you to the land of Canaan, where they are mightier than you, and this wasp that I will send in front of you, that will destroy those who are remaining and those who stand before you. What is the message of this tzira, this wasp? That it says that it blinded them and it also sterilized them from above and below. We explain that we say that from the sweat of the chayos, that is the divine spiritual entities, we have the river Dinar that stands on top of the heads in Gehenna. What does this mean? What is the idea of the sweat? It is a form of poison, like sweat itself is toxic. Like it says that Hashem removes this viciousness, which is the psoilus, just as sweat is the waste within a person, because in every world, in every stage, there's going to be both good and bad. And a person doesn't mean to say that it's chas v'shalom literally bad, but it's like the idea of anger and passion, which is chesed and gevura within the worlds, but again, in a non-healthy or non-sanctified manner. And so too, within the person, which he is a microcosm, there is also these levels. And he has to arouse his gevura to self-discipline, to restrain the negative connotation and expression, because from this side of this poison or this waste, which is the wickedness, like it says, that it hovers over the heads of the wicked. Like our sages say in the Gemara and Brachas, that a person should always have his Yetzer Tov shout down his Yetzer Hara. What does this mean? Lo'olam, he should always have it. That constantly there has to be this passion that comes from Gevura, this form of anger, because every person is a mixture of good and evil, and the evil is the fierceness and this anger that comes from the sitra of Ra, the bad side. Like we say, it's Ra l'shamayim and Ra l'briyos, and anger and feistiness, this sort of like fierceness, should be poured over the Ra itself, that he should overwhelm the Ra with the feistiness and anger of the Tov. And this stimulus in the level of Gevura comes from the sweat or the waste of the chayos, the spiritual angels, which is the passion that is described in the first chapter of the Kriya Shema, where it speaks also about Gevura, and therefore it has to pour out this fieriness, and he has to have this anger over his Yetzer Hara in every way, that when he will think deeply about the Amun of Hashem, and he'll think about Hashem Echad, and that the Jewish people were the first purpose of all of creation, and therefore he wants to subsume himself with Hashem, then he will fire up his anger, and he will say, why don't I like this all the time? Even when I'm not davening, why don't I have the same passion? And this is what we then focus on in the second chapter of the Kriya Shema, where we say, V'chara'af, it will fire up this passion, that will draw down this enthusiasm, the positive form of enthusiasm that we discuss in the first chapter of the Shema, will stay with us even after the Shema is over. And therefore it says that you will turn away and serve other gods, because in truth, when a person is not in a time of davening, he's not like those who are completely distancing themselves and throwing off their service of Hashem, which is the case of or the circumstance when he's saying the Shema with a total passion, that it appears that the rest of the day he's like completely distant and chas v'sholom is a form of a revolution against Hashem. Like it says that lest your heart turn aside from this singularity and unity. So while he's davening and he's saying the Shema and he feels such a passion, and then he reflects on what he's doing during his ordinary day, he starts to feel like, well, that other time is like a form of prikasol, of throwing off godliness. And it's as if he's turned away. And here he becomes calmed down, or he becomes subdued, so he shouldn't have any negativity towards others. And this is the objective of this tzira, this flying wasp creature, that it annuls, it neuters the ra, that is, it cools off, that it shouldn't have this passion, and therefore it should not be able to procreate. And it also blinds the eyes, that is, he shouldn't look at other people or other matters of the world with an ayin ra, with jealousy that comes from ra, because that's not where the bracha is going to come, because the bracha only comes from that which is hidden from the eye. And the bracha of Hashem, the drawing down of godliness, is only with a good eye. So it blinds his eye from looking negatively at others and looking longingly at material things. And it neuters the capacity to promulgate more and more negativity. And now we can understand the idea of the Meraglim who didn't want to go into a land of Canaan, which is to be drawn down into literal mitzvahs, into gashmias. They wanted to instead stand in the spiritual state in the wilderness. Like we say, they said it's a land which consumes its inhabitants. That is, its inhabitants have no place for themselves. They become completely subsumed to Hashem, that there should be ein oid, because this was the generation that knew Hashem and saw Hashem, and the source of their neshamas, which was higher and higher. And the Chiti and the Yavusi and the Amuri who dwell in the mountain, like the pasuk continues in their report after their mission, that these are the 7 nations of idolatry, that they live there at that time, and they are rooted in the 7 midos of chaos, which is the source of the 7 negative forms of midos, that need to be so cautious about, not to stumble into these midas chas v'shalom, because a person has a vulnerability to being dragged down into death. Like it says, these 7 nations were intense and more powerful. However, they said they were more powerful than us. Latsumi mimeka. And what does that mean? That they gave them greater stature, like it says in Yirmiyah, and now they have taught them of these exalted ones of the head, that they were considered exalted is because they caused them. That is, the spies sort of elevated these people in their eyes. They considered them to be so great in their eyes, and therefore they became great. That was what they projected onto them. However, what we really needed to do was to minimize them. Like Kalev said, he removed from them, and Hashem is with us. That means that Hashem, who is drawn down to us through Mikra and Mishnah and all the different formats that Hashem expresses himself amongst us. And this is what the sending of the Meraglim was. Like we say regarding the mitzvahs, we do it before. We say the bracha before we do the mitzvah. That is, before there has to be this elevation, that we elevate the material through which we are going to do the mitzvah. For example, we take an esrog, which could just be eaten as a fruit, but we have to draw down the divine through the bracha prior to our being able to elevate it up to the spiritual. And regarding this, we said that before the Jewish people entered Eretz Yisrael, Moshe sent one man, that is from each tribe, that the neshama is drawn down from the one, and they were all anashim. They were all from this masculine or contributory quality. And this is the objective was that they should evoke the lofty godliness that is contained within it. However, as we see, that we have to elevate it to the level of the Mayan Nukvin. We have to lower ourselves in order to elevate. And they didn't have this humility to lower themselves into the world. But the truth is that when we lower ourselves, then we are able to elevate that which we bring down, we enter into. And now we understand what's explained in other places on the term Raya Mehemna, the trusted shepherd, in Parshas Kisisa, and so forth. And this is what it means, that it's like the mincha and the nesachim, the commensurate ancillary parts of the offering. That a mincha, which came from vegetation, it came from wheat and so forth, which comes from mayim, which is the opposite of chai, which is eish, and every carbon has to have the mincha with salt, which is the quality of daimim. Salt is mineral. And so too, the idea of tefillin and other mitzvahs, maasiyos, are drawn down into the level of doimim. For example, the tefillin in the pasuk that we refer to in the V'ahavta of Kriya Shema and also in Kaddish Li, which is the level of Chacham Ilah that becomes materialized onto the parchment and the letters, which are gashmiyos, but we have to remove the negativity, like it says, and then we can make, as we referenced earlier, into a settled land, an eretz mishvei sechem. Like it says, the king will reign there forever, or dwell there, yeshiva. He will be brought down to this level, and will bring himself down from this lofty level to be a dir b'tachtenim. Like it says that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, this is in the Gemara and Brachas, Hashem only has the immediate area of halacha, and in the Beis Hamikdash it says that God dwells there trustworthily or reliably. And similar when we engage in Torah, and through beginning with that he is known, her husband is known through the gates, Noida B'Shar and Baila, you recognize that from Mishlei at the end of the Eshes Chayil, but what it refers to here is that we know Hashem through the gates of Torah, through each person's gate, the gates of his heart. That is, that the dwelling that the Jewish people make, that is the settling through their kavan and their davening, that we reach out to Hashem and Hashem responds. Therefore, it is called an eretz moshvei sechem, again, dwells, settled, permanent, embedded, that we settle it in, like it says, not just that we are the children, but the boinaich, hatikri bonaich, children, but boinaich, we build, we make the world a place receptive to godliness through the halachas which are invested within material, worldly matters, like the doimim, we've referenced before, the salt, the tzemeach, the mincha, the nesachim, and so forth, as we can understand. Then there's a small kitzer here. The Alter Rebbe summarizes, and he says that the idea of the shrafim come from the fiery yesod, the element of fire. So too, there is also in the Nefesh Elokis, which is comprised of all four yesodis, that Hashem can push away the darkness through the Kriya Shema. When we contemplate that Hashem is Elokeinu, and through this we come to love Him with the fiery flame, and concurrent with this, that we can overpower, or we can push back with the Yesod Ha'esh Eliki through drawing it into the physical mitzvahs. So it's not enough to be very excited. We also have to do the mitzvahs, such as the mitzvah tefillin, which is comparable to all of Torah. And this is the mighty hand. And through this, we settle in this godliness, so it shouldn't collapse. And this is through us having the passion, as it's described in the Gemara, this yargiz, this sort of enthusiasm or passion, which is represented in the mincha and the nesachim. That ends this maimer. Now we continue on in Daf Mem Aleph Amud Gimel about the idea of these nesachim. It says in Parshas Tzav, and if you will consume from the meats of the slaughterings, the karbonis of the shlomov, and it says in the Gemara, and there's two eatings that are referred to here, that you eat. One is that you eat from the mizbeach. So our question is, the idea of karbonis is that they are brought on the mizbeach from the cattle. And why is it called consumed, eating, achila? Like it says, lechem, the bread is the fire of Hashem, or lachmi, my bread. So what is the metaphor of eating and of bread? So to understand the idea of the nesachim, these libations, that they would pour wine on the mizbeach, and it would go down into these rivets that would flow away from the Beis Hamikdash, that these were these hollows that were brought down all the way into the depth of the mountain. This seems rather odd. The whole concept of the carbon is to uplift, that they would slaughter the ox or the lamb as something that was animal, and they would take its life that would be elevated above, and there would be a cloud, and the karbonis would go up above. But the nesachim, which come from vegetation, they would bring down. Again, these channels would bring the wine away and go down into the belly of the mountain, which would seem to be sort of counter to the whole concept of karbonos, which is an elevation. And we also, why wine? The idea that karbonos are not only the reich nechoyach, for a pleasant aroma, like it says in the Gemara, that whoever reads Kriya Shema without tefillin is like bringing a sacrifice without the nesachim. You recognize that from the previous mime. And the point being, based on what it says, that wine rejoices the heart in Tillim. And it says that, again, other quotes that underscore that wine brings joy to life. That simcha is when something is revealed. That through wine, or for example, on a person's day of their chasana, the day of joy, they come out from their shell. Like when a person is joyous and happy, they're expressive. And the idea being that in every manner there is the pnimius and the chitzenius. The pnimius is how it receives its life force from Hashem. And the chitzenius is the way it has an impact on others. Because as we know, there's no blade of grass that doesn't have a malach that is directing it, and so on. Now, within every fruit or blade of grass or harvest, there's two levels. There's the taste of the product, and then there is the sort of spiritual idea, the very fabric of it. I'm sorry, the taste is the spiritual, and then there's the meat of the fruit itself. Now, the level of the taste has two capacities. One is that it receives from that spiritual source that gives it its existence, like the pasuk says that the harvest is from the sun and so forth, and from the moon, and all of that impact of nature and the spiritual side. And then there is the specifics that it causes this blade of grass to grow and so on, and its capacity to have an impact on the very physical structure of the fruit and so on. And also there is within the level of the living animal, which is the pnimius and the ruchnius. It is again attached to its cause. This is the face of the lion, the face of the ox on the chariot of Hashem. In Ezekiel's vision, like we know that the face of the lion is the source of the nefesh hachayis, the face of the ox is the source of the nefesh habahamis, and the life force that is giving life to the very physical flesh of the animal is the visible, the chitzenius. Similarly, we find in the nefesh of a person, the source and the pnimius of the nefesh is attached to its cause, the face of the person from, again, the chariot, to receive its life force. And the chitzenius is the impact that it has on, that it sustains the body. And so too, by the malachim, it says that they receive one from another, that the power that there is within a malach to say kodesh is that he receives from above, like it says, that it is higher, from higher to the highest of levels. V'noisim, it also gives reshus zelazeh, you recognize this from the davening, which is the capacity for there to be an impact, and a gift, and an influence from one malach to another that receives from it. And similarly, in the whole process of ishtalshelus, like it says in the Eitz Chaim, that all ishtalshelus is a series of cause and effect, again, only from the external. That the ishtalshelus is from the chitzenius elyon that becomes the pnimius of the tachton, but the pnimius of the elyon cannot be yerid lamata. Like we always talk about, the malchus of a level becomes the kesser of the next level, and so on. And the Alter Rebbe here references in Tanya where this is discussed further. Now, within everything, there is also the pnimius, which is like the term for panim, meaning where it's turned to, where its emphasis is. Like we say, don't turn to something bad, which is the impact that he turns away, and it's attached to his source. And the chitzenius, which is the hashpah, that which it brings to others. And then there is this medium, which allows the level of the atzmis that attaches the two koiches together. So you have these three ideas. You have the Chabad, the Chagas, and the Nehi. And it's possible that you can have a keli for these three levels. You have the Pnimius, the Emtsoi, and the Chitzai, the inner, the middle, and the outside. That can be remembered by the mnemonic Samech Taf Reish, Soif Toich Reish, as explained in other places. Now, these three koiches also reflect Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram is Chesed, the water that comes from above to below, the power of influence. Yitzchak is Eish, that it elevates up. And Yaakov is the consistent Briach HaTichon that runs through and through, that connects all things together. So now we come back to that pasuk from Tillim that we referenced earlier, that wine brings joy to the heart of man. That is, that wine arouses the pnimius hanefesh from that which is hidden to that which is revealed, because the wine is contained deeply within the grape and is brought out, and therefore it reflects that in its impact, that it draws out that which is otherwise hidden. And whoever drinks wine, their face turns red. Again, a revelation of that which is hidden, because the living soul, the power that gives life to our nefesh, is invested within the blood. And the wine arouses this revelation of the pnimius of the blood. And as such, it reveals also the pnimius of the nefesh hachienis that is invested within the pnimius of the blood. And if he drinks too much, he becomes overwhelmed and shlach, he falls asleep, because there's so much revelation that the keli can't handle it, and that's why the person passes out.